Academica Media. Welcome to Teach the Way They Learn, expert insight on educating all students. And now your host, Liliana Salazar.
Welcome to all our listeners to Teach the Way They Learn by Academica Media. My name is Liliana Salazar, and I am so happy to be the host of this amazing monthly podcast. The mission of this podcast is to discuss teaching strategies and how they can be the most effective in reaching all groups of students. This podcast will challenge you to put aside tradition and comfort levels and encourage you to embrace different techniques that might be more beneficial for all students. There will be times where it will only be me, and there will be times when I will have phenomenal participants to share the experiences in improving academic outcomes for all students. And today is that day. I am so happy to have my amazing friend, Mike Diamond, on the show today. And before I talk a little bit about Mike Diamond, because there's many things to say about Mike Diamond, I did want to add that this year I'm trying to add positive stories to my podcast because I feel that we need more hope and more positivity in the world. And I thought that the best way to start that is inviting Mike to be a part of this podcast this month. And also, I just read his book, A Dose of Positivity. So I am feeling even more positive than what I normally am. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So Mike Diamond is an author, television personality, director, life coach, and interventionist, known for his work on the hit TV show NY Inc. and Bondi Inc. Tattoo Crew, which is currently nominated for a Logie Award for the best reality series. Originally from Perth, Western Australia. Get ready, guys, so when you hear his accent, you're going to love it. Mike got off to a bit of a rough start battling undiagnosed dyslexia. He started using drugs and alcohol at age 12, and he's going to talk a little bit about that journey today. Although Mike has had plenty of highs in his life, he has also had his low moments along the way. Mike has battled cocaine and alcohol addiction for the majority of his life. The defining moment came at the height of his career while shooting a TV show for VH1. To the outside world, Mike looked like he was living the dream, but on the inside, Mike was spiritually bankrupt and miserable. He realized that if he didn't turn his life around, he was going to die. April 16, 2006 was the day Mike Diamond got sober. Since then, Mike has literally helped. He has hundreds, but I say thousands of people on the road to recovery. He is on beck and call to all of his clients and friends, helping them through their life problems and battles with addiction. Listeners, it is my absolute pleasure and honor to have Mike Diamond on our podcast today. Mike, you want to say hi to everyone?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Hi everyone.
So Mike, I wanted to see if you could start a little bit talking about just your life and your family life. I know was a very difficult one. Your identification of the dyslexia and how that impacted you, and then talk a little bit about how through your life you got to the point where you had to make this decision of that I'm going to stop doing this substance abuse or else I'm just going to die, and how that and how that journey has led you to where you are now, and then we'll talk a little bit about where you are now.
Yeah, well, so I mean, what's crazy right now is I'm actually on the TV show Intervention. And when you read the bio, 20 years ago, I was shooting that show for VH1, where I was out of control with one of the biggest celebrities in the world. And I saw his wife and kids leaving, and I chose then to intervene on myself. The funny thing is, 20 years ago, the guy that was supposed to direct that show didn't, and then he got me on the TV show Intervention. Wow. So it's a complete 360 of now being of service to others. So when you go back to my upbringing, being born in Perth, Western Australia, I'm no longer wounded from my past. I'm wiser, but I grew up in a very chaotic household. The first time I tried alcohol was 4 years old, where a relative got me drunk, and I nearly died of alcohol poisoning. And my parents, instead of chastising the people that got me drunk, I was chastised. And that was that set the tone of what I had to deal with my two insane parents. At 7 years old, I remember my brother waking up in the middle of the night screaming, and I didn't know what was wrong with him. And he had measles encephalitis. And then he went into a coma. And I watched him in a coma, my older brother, and I just couldn't process this. And then my little sister was 13 weeks premature. So I spent my days going from each hospital, and not understanding what was going on. And my father really didn't have any emotional regulation skills, and he did just one of those hardworking men, which I respect him. He worked hard. He would just come home and unload on me and beat me up. So I really didn't understand how to process my emotions because no one showed me anything. And I was always in fight, flight, and freeze. Now, my dyslexia was never picked up. They just said I didn't want to pay attention, because what was crazy was I was a super athlete. And to this day, which is crazy, my sister would look at my times because her kids, my nephews, run, and I still hold records in Australia. But what was very interesting about my life was no one actually tried to unlock my potential. They tried to bring me down. So when I'd win a championship, my mum would call me a show off. And then when I'd go home to get approval from my father, he would say, well, you didn't train hard, you don't deserve the medal. So it was damned if you do, damned if you don't. So my dad owned a liquor store, and there was always liquor around, but he didn't drink. And at 12 years old, I thought, I'll take a swig of this liquor. What's it like? And instantly the pain went away. And the crazy thing about drugs and alcohol, and I tell people, is that it's guaranteed. When you don't have connection with your family or loved ones, and you don't feel enough because no one is giving you an environment to thrive, then you have to find something guaranteed to mood alter. And the guarantee is, if I drink liquor or I do drugs at a young age, I get that desire. It removes the pain. And no one's allowing me to express my pain and process my feelings.
Almost like, and I hate to interrupt you, but I just want to say that was almost your high, right? Because
oh yeah, of course.
In a few minutes you've talked about, and I just want to bring it, just let the educators, in the listening, and also parents that are listening. You talked about that flight, fight, or freeze, right? That when children are in a moment of crisis, they're either going to run away from the crisis, they're going to fight through the crisis, or they're going to freeze. They get into this, this fetal position, and they just don't know what to do. And I think
I'll add one more. Or
yes, go.
We feed.
Or we feed, exactly. Or we feed.
Right.
And in your situation, you had all of those, but at the same time, when you started with the liquor, definitely that was feeding something that that you didn't have. And I think that the trauma in your childhood, I appreciate you sharing that, because I think that sometimes teachers and educators don't understand the very strong impact of what is happening in a child's life, how that impacts what is happening in a school setting. And sometimes we lose our cool. We might scream at a student. We might say, wow, this student is just lazy. This student just does not care. But unless we, just dig a little deeper and see exactly what is going on in his or home life, we really can't be that person, to really help them through this process. So I just wanted to add that, because I think that just in the first 5 minutes, what you've said has been so very powerful. Go ahead.
Well, look at it like this. The subconscious mind is programmed in the first 7 years of life, right? When we go through different brain development.
Mm-hmm.
So now, if you look at it like that, the first 7 years, the subconscious mind, which is the software, programs you. Toxic environment. We know that addiction is part genetic and part environment, okay? And then if we look deeper into generational trauma, okay, we know that trauma is downloaded generation after generation. Correct. Unless you become a transitional character like myself and move away from the toxic environment, and then choose to make empowering choices by knowing that I have to find other mentors, and then I have to spend time with myself because my software is off. Now, what people don't understand, talk therapy is fantastic, but talk therapy is affecting the conscious mind. To get into the subconscious programming, you have to go deep into the tissues of the body, because trauma stays buried in the tissues. Because what people
150%, and people don't even realize that if you've been in a traumatic experience and there's a certain smell, even a smell that you remember from that trauma, it triggers the trauma. We're so correct.
Now here's this, go deeper. The brain, the way it functions is when an explicit memory is, I had coffee yesterday, I remember that, right? Implicit memory is different. When you suffer a traumatic event, parts of the brain shut down to protect us. So the implicit memory, it stores the trauma. So you may smell, let's just say you were abused by someone that smoked nicotine, right? The association is buried in the subconscious mind, but you don't know it's there because the implicit memory shuts down parts of the brain to protect you. Now, the limbic system and the amygdala, which stores all the memory and the emotion, right, has it stored there. So what happens when the nicotine smell comes? It triggers the sympathetic nervous system. So without even knowing it, you're hijacked by your sympathetic nervous system, and you don't know why. But your body now is responding to something, and the rational part of your brain hasn't had a chance to rationalize the feelings.
That's
you
correct.
are hijacked by the emotional part of your brain. So now, if you go a little step further, you look at me, I never was safe and secure. So the primitive part of my brain was overdeveloped. Now, you add in dyslexia, where I'm more right brain favored, right? I never spent time processing, and the front part of my brain, the prefrontal cortex, was underdeveloped. So what was my only safe ground? Running. I was great at running. So I would alter my mood through running. So I could push my body through extreme pain. And by pushing my body through that pain, I would get the endorphin hit, the dose, right? A dose of endorphins. So over the years, when I would face a problem, instead of sitting in the problem and feeling the problem and trying to go deep into myself, the natural thing was go and run. Because I could alter my mood with running. But then after a while, you're running from your problems.
Correct. You mentioned a few things that I want to elaborate a little bit on. I mean, you've said a lot of things that are very powerful, but I want you to go back and just tell me about when you identified that you did have dyslexia. I think that that's important for our listeners to hear.
Yeah.
And I also want you to unwrap a little bit about how you chose to be this transitional character, and how we as educators can help be that mentor, be that person that helps a child that is in crisis, such as yourself, go pick that road of transition, versus instead of going and being a part of what their family has always been, which is that vicious cycle of just staying within the substance abuse or within the trauma, and then having children and then doing the same thing. So can you talk to me a little bit about how the dyslexia happened, and then also talk to me about the people that helped you be that transitional character?
Absolutely. So the dyslexia was funny. I was working. I'm very good at pitching things, very good at selling things. So I had an idea, and if I have an idea, because I graduated school, but I just navigated school on feeling. I could get stuff done, and I pitched an idea to a friend of mine who was a big producer, and he loved it. And he said, "Okay, let's write it down." So we wrote it down, and then he said, "Let's write a pilot." So I wrote the pilot in a day, and he calls me, and he's like, "Oh, you're dyslexic." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Well, my sister's dyslexic. Your phonics are off. You're writing words as you think they should be written, but I'm not judging you. The creativity is off the hook." So I went online and started looking at some stuff. Then I went to a doctor, and I said, "Look, I'm working with a guy, and could you test me for dyslexia? I think I'm dyslexic." So we did a bunch of tests, and he came back. He said, "Oh, you're definitely dyslexic." So
Not just dyslexic, definitely dyslexic.
You're definitely dyslexic. Definitely dyslexic. So the great thing was I have incredible memory. I'm photographic memory-wise. My sense of memory is incredible. I can remember time, date, smell. My associated memory is through the roof. So I can only learn through associated memory. I can't learn through rote learning. It has to actually connect with me. Then I messaged my sister, and she was struggling. And I said, maybe you're dyslexic. And because she'd always struggled, she's trying to get into university. And she got a dyslexic test, and she's dyslexic. And it just was like, wow. So to me, it was so amazing, because then I realized how I process information is the way I process information. And then what I did is I came up with my own formulas. So I would find out that the really great intelligent people read a book a week. So what I would do with my dyslexia is I chunk everything down. So I go, okay, well, how many words in a book? So I'd count the lines, I'd count the pages, and I go, there's 70,000 words in a book. I'm like, okay. So I'd sit down and I'd time myself reading for 1 minute, and I calculate I read around 200 words a minute. And I go, okay, if I time that by an hour and then 7 days, it's around 70,000 words. So I realized I could read a book a week if I can focus my attention for 1 hour a day and read 200 words a minute. But what I did to help myself read and learn to read correctly is I'd get an audio book and I'd buy the same book. And I would put a pen and picture and discipline myself and read slowly across. And I would read everything and then I'd stop and I'd write notes. So I'd always remember it. And then I studied Lazarov, who was the famous guy that played Mozart to help kids slow down their brain waves to learn the Quran. So then I would play Mozart. So over the weeks, I would remember everything I'd read. And now I can read 200, 300 words a minute because I retrained myself and I slow myself down.
I just need to add that maybe you realize it, maybe you don't, but you literally just went through the most powerful teaching strategies that there are in working with children that are dyslexic. And you probably didn't even realize that
intuitively I made it
especially
up.
Especially getting it's a ruler, it's a colored ruler, and it has like a little transparency and they're going line by line. Chunking is another.
I just did it myself.
And you did it all by yourself. So it just proves, I want all of my listeners just to understand, that he did it all on his own and it actually worked. Imagine when a teacher is facilitating the learning process for a child that has dyslexia. And just so you know that nationally, many states are recognizing that dyslexia is a very big challenge and obstacle for children. And there are many states that are passing very strong legislation now on the fact that educators must understand what dyslexia is and also know how to teach to it and use the strategies. And I think that that the fact that you've just described that it actually works and you're an adult, I think is inspirational to our listeners because the majority of them are educators and parents as well. And just so they know that these strategies actually work, but you have to have either an educator or a parent that is going to be willing to dedicate that time to do so. I wanted you to talk a little bit about your journey of how when you left Perth, how you got into all these different jobs, but then how that led you into that substance abuse and how you finally decided to realize I can't continue living my life like this because I'm going to end up dying, and talk about those transitional characters that helped you make that difference in your life. Because I think we might have listeners and educators and parents that might have children that are struggling with substance abuse. And I want, as I said earlier, the podcast today is about hope. And I want them to understand that there is hope out there. So if you could share that journey with us, it'd be great.
Well, here's the thing. I knew I could act by fluke. And so what happened, I'll go back to when I was in Perth. I was good at sports and there was a play called The Pied Piper and I was sitting in the back and I didn't want to be in the play and I was with another kid and I was messing around and I was just mocking the kids rehearsing. So what happened is there was 2 or 3 days before the production was supposed to go live. And this is my power, my dyslexia and just visual. 3 of the kids got the flu and they're like, we've got to cancel the play. So the track coach said, we've got to cancel the play. No one knows the parts. And my friend ratted me out and said, Mike knows the parts. Now, here's the thing. The track coach was my best friend. I loved her, Miss Plummer. So she grabs me and she goes, Mike, do you really know the parts? I said, yeah, I know the whole play. She was like, what do you mean? I said, I know the whole play. She goes, how? I said, they're rehearsing for 6 weeks. Now, here's the thing I didn't realize my superpower was. I was never afraid to get in front of people in public speak. I was afraid to read in public because I couldn't read because of my dyslexia. But I wasn't afraid to get up and speak. I didn't know people were afraid to speak in public. I also wasn't afraid to perform in public. Now the power of my dyslexia, because I was confident with just who I was, but I didn't know the academic side. So she goes, can you sing 2 of the songs and remember the lines? I said, yeah. I banged out the 2 songs and then I did the lines. And she said, wait, now you've got the lead. I'm like, this is it. So I remember it was 500 people in the audience and everyone was nervous. I'm like, I'm not nervous. I'm going to kill it. And I got up and rocked the house. And I was like, I'm getting out of Perth. Because I always wanted to come to America. I said, I can act. So literally a couple of years later, I found an advertisement in the paper. And I took the bus an hour and a half. And it said, looking for actors and models. And I put on a shirt and tie. And there's thousands of kids lining up. My life has always been very weird like this. Opportunities just come and I step into them. I'm not afraid to step in the opportunities. And that's the dyslexia. Just like, I'm going to give it a shot. And so they pull me in and I read off the script. And he's like, we love you. And I'm like, you love me? He's like, you're great. And so he's like, go to the next room. So we go to the next room and he's like, we're going to sign you. And I'm like, you are? And he said, yeah. And we're going to take some photos of you. And I said, look, I'm going to be transparent. I have no money. I work at a grocery store. I deliver pizza. He goes, no. We're going to pay for your photos. And then once you start working, we'll take the money back. I'm like, I'm not working. What's this guy talking about? I'm going to get free photos. 2 days later, I get a call and he says to me, hey, you've got a casting. I'm like, what's that? Because I thought it was an audition. He goes, it's a casting. So I catch the bus and he's like, I had no clue what I was doing. I go in and I just do my thing. I get back on the bus and my dad goes, oh, the agency called. I said, what happened? They're like, they called you back. And instantly I think they call me back. I'm in trouble because when I got called back, I go to the principal's office, right?
I can't. That is hilarious.
So I get on with the agent and I'm so nervous. And I was like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, they called me back. What did I do wrong? He goes, you didn't do anything wrong. That's the process. You get called back, go to the next callback. So I went to 2 callbacks and I landed the commercial. It was a national commercial. And I was so excited, right? And all my friends were watching and it didn't air, but I got paid. So I was just like devastated, right? I did 2 commercials back to back and they didn't air. But it gave me the courage to move to Sydney and audition for acting school.
Wow.
When I auditioned acting school, I got in the top acting school. But here's the thing I tell everyone. Your intuition is the most important key thing. I got a bad mentor. He was a drunk. He was not a good person. And I got myself in a very nefarious situation where I was with another student and he took advantage of another student in front of me in an acting scene. And we left for the evening. I went home and I knew I had to make a choice. So I went to her the next day at acting school. I said, he shouldn't have done that. She goes, don't say anything. They'll throw you out of school. And I was like, I've got to say something. So I went to the dean and I said, look, I shouldn't have been in this situation. He took advantage of her. He's going to say he didn't do it. I was there. What do I need to do to save her? She cannot be treated like this. And he said, are you willing to leave acting school? I said, I'll leave. 2 months before graduation, I left. So they threw him out.
Wow, Mike.
Right. Now, check this out, how powerful God is. I'm walking down the street in Sydney, in Pitt Street Mall. I'm going to America. That's my goal. I don't care about acting school. I had to intervene for that girl to show her no one should treat her like that. And there's a clothes store called Politics Men's Room, Pitt Street Mall. And I used to walk back and forth and they would mock me because I was, going to acting school. So I went, that's it. I'm going to ask for a job. So I went in and the manager was half Greek. I'm half Greek. And I said, I need a job. He's like, aren't you going to acting school? I said, I left. I'm moving to America. Give me a job. So what does he do? He puts me on the spot. I've always been put on the spot. He said, if you can sell clothes to the next person that walks in, I'll give you a job. I said, I'll take the Pepsi challenge, but stay out of my way. So a lady, I always believe that I can sell anything and I sell myself. A lady walks in and I said, give me space. So I started to build some rapport with her. And I said, are you looking for something for your husband or your son? Because I know it's a menswear boutique. And she's like, my son. I said, wait, is he about my size? And she says, yes. Now I improvise. I went to acting school. So I'm like, give me 1 second. So I look in the shop window because I know if it's in the shop window, they want to sell it. And I look for my size of all the clothes. And I look at her and I said, give me 1 second. And I go into the change room. I put the clothes on and I come out wearing the clothes.
You did not.
I swear to God. And guess what she
God.
does? She goes, I'll take the outfit. And I go, guess who got a job? Now, here's the crazy thing. I work in the store for 6 months. I become one of the top sales guys.
Right.
And at 23 years old, he offers me a couple $100,000 a year to be the area manager. I said, I'm not. I'm moving to America. He said, you're crazy. 3 days later, a lady walks in. I do the same song and dance. I send her a bunch of clothes for her husband. And she's like, what are you doing in a clothes store? I said, I'm moving to America. I'm going to do acting. I'm going to write books. I'm going to do this. I'm done with Australia. Do you know what she says to me? She said, you should enter the green card lottery. I think she's crazy. Listen to this. Never heard of it. The next morning.
Yeah, I had never heard of it either.
No,
right?
It's an open-air mall. We're doing the front windows and she's coming down the mall. And I said to my friend, damn it, she's got the clothes in the bag. She's going to return the clothes. I'm going to hide in the back, right? So I'm hiding in the back and my friend covers for me. He's like, is everything okay? She goes, yeah. He goes, the clothes okay? She goes, yeah. It's like, what are you here for? She goes, I bought Mike the green card lottery ticket. I come out, I look at her, I said, I'm going to tell you
Wow.
straight up. I was hiding in the back. I thought you were going to return the clothes. She gives me a hug. She gives me the ticket. She goes, there's something special about you. You're going to win a green card. The next day, I went to the American embassy. I asked them if it was real. They said yes. I gave them my parents' address because I was coming anyway to America.
Right.
I waited 6 months. I waited 10 months. And I felt like I was going to win. And I said to my parents, did you get anything from the immigration department? They said, no. My parents never supported me. They did. They just didn't tell me.
Wow.
They sent me a package with all these photos. And I got a letter from the American embassy. Michael, my full name is Michael Marcus Diamond. You've been randomly selected to win a green card lottery and immigrate to America.
Wow.
Took me a year to immigrate, but check this out. This is the moral of the story. See, God has a plan, and we're all connected with a divine purpose. And I must bring value to other people with that purpose. And I must remove all obstacles and all hate and be loving kind. By standing up for that girl, God put me on the right path.
I agree with you.
And he gave me a green card. No, I didn't get a green card. God put that woman, made me get a job, and I didn't worry about it. My life has always been like that. And from that day, I would go in and out of sobriety. But my pivotal moment was when I was sitting in a hotel room with the late Scott Weiland, who's one of the biggest musicians in the world, and his wife and kids were leaving. And we were doing drugs and alcohol, and VH1 had given me a TV show. And I was like, it's done, right? He's like, I'll do whatever I want. And I stepped back and I went to myself, I'm living a lie. And I knew I was living a lie. And I knew I chose, God had given me these great gifts and I was wasting them away, right?
Yeah.
So what did I do was I called a friend of mine that was sober and I said, I'm getting sober, right? And never turned back. I was like, service and sobriety. Now, the ironic thing is this. Scott Weiland died in 2010 when I was detoxing someone, a big celebrity. I'm lucky I was throwing events for celebrities. Now I get most of them sober and their kids. I now mentor Scott Weiland's son.
Wow.
How's this? I have photos of myself and Scott, and I met Scott Weiland's son by chance. And he's like, Mike Diamond. I said, yeah, Noah Weiland. And I showed him photos of his dad and me. And I said, you know what? My son is 6. You were 5 or 6 with your sister Lucy when I got sober, and unfortunately your dad didn't. I called Scott's ex-wife, Mary, and I told her because I wanted permission to write my book and tell the story. And she said, I remember that day like it was yesterday.
Wow.
That's the power. Now, what I tell people is this. Having mentors, the right mentors, you only need one. So all I do now as an interventionist or a mentor or a coach is very simple. I meet everyone where they're at. That's it. I don't care what you've done yesterday. I'm meeting you where you're at now. Then I slow you down and connect with you and calm down your nervous system and talk to you to figure out why you've made the choices you've made. Then I look at where you've come from, because where you've come from has motivated you to choose the choices you've made in the moment.
Right.
And then I start reframing whatever you've done. And if you've been wounded, make you wiser. And then I teach you special rituals and routines to make empowering choices and get an empowering dose. I call it a dose of positivity: dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins. And then takes a very micro process to help you reach your macro goal. But the most important thing that people need to understand is people give up because they're hopeless and helpless, because they don't think there's purpose and meaning in their life. But here's the trick I teach everyone. Everyone has meaning and purpose, and I'll tell you what. There's 4 stages to learning, and not many people understand this. We never start off as a professional. We're all amateurs because we're unconscious and incompetent. We don't know what we don't know, right?
Right.
Now we become consciously incompetent. Most people quit because that's hard. If you get the right mentor or coach or teacher, you work hard through repetition and focusing and visualization, you become consciously competent. Here's the mistake most people make. They stop there. No. Once you become unconsciously competent, it becomes an ingrained habit in your subconscious mind, and it becomes second nature. Then you go into a state of flow. What I teach people is this, is I break down every process into a very simple way of learning that is easy to build the habit and the habit stack. And then you substitute the disempowering habits from the empowering habits, and you always have a purpose. Your purpose must be to serve others. And that's why I tell people I'm recession proof. They said, why? I said, I bring value to people, and people always pay for what they value, because if the cause is right, the effect is money.
I think that so powerful. I mean, I think this, as listeners, I'm sure that they're processing everything that you've said, which is so powerful. And I just want to talk about educators, because I think that we do choose this field because we want to give back to the world, because we want to make a difference in the life of a child. And even though I know that many people think that's corny, right? I'm teacher, I'm going to make a difference.
No.
I think that anyone in this moment, even those that are listening, can think back and say, you know, who was your favorite teacher? Miss Plummer, was that for you? She made a difference, a huge difference in your life. I would say that Dr. Dale Willoughby was the one for me when I was in high school, and he was my choir teacher. So definitely, I think that having the right person and educators, knowing that you can be that child's person, you can be that person that unlocks that student's superpower, like you were talking about your superpowers, I think is very valuable. And I feel that sometimes as educators, we're getting so bogged down, Mike, with standardized testing, with scoping, with sequence, like with so many things, you know, that we're forgetting what exactly we went into teaching for, right? Which is actually to make a difference in the lives of children, just like you're making the difference in the lives of individuals that could be struggling with a substance abuse or just going through a very difficult time in their life. And they need those 4 doses, and they need that unpacking of what exactly is the root of the problem. And let's get through that root of the problem, uncover it, and let's go through this journey together so we can get you in a better place. And I think that that's what educators do. But I do feel that because of everything that is happening and all the requirements that we have, that we're forgetting that. And I it's so powerful and so important for me to share this with the listeners, and that you shared this, because I think we can all be a Miss Plummer. I think that we can all show our students and identify their superpower. And I'm just so glad that you shared that. And I know that we're quickly running out of time. When you and I start talking, or when you and I start texting, it becomes like a dissertation. So I want to give a shout out to Ross, because Ross, my producer, is online. Ross, are you there? That you could speak? I don't know if he's I don't know if he's just recording or he's able to speak. So Ross is there. So I wanted to give a shout out to Ross. Ross, are you able to talk, or are you on mute?
Thank you. I was on mute for a little bit, answering a few other things because we have a meeting coming up in a little bit.
Yeah.
But hi, everyone. I'm Ross. I'm a former Somerset Academy student. I'm glad to be here. I'm stoked and excited to hear Mike's story, to check out the book, and I'm hoping you guys are able to tune into the dose of positivity and mindfulness and check out how he was able to overcome a lot of these challenges.
Ross, can you tell me about your favorite teacher? Who is that one person that made a difference in your life?
I would say my high school counselors, Miss Brandon and Miss Dory. I struggled a lot. You know, I'm an outgoing person and things like that, but sometimes, you know, the people that talk a lot sometimes do need, you know, a break and things like that. So my counselors are always my go-to person at times where I felt at most defeat, at times where I felt like, you know, I didn't want to pursue higher education, or I didn't want to do certain things like that, or pursue different leadership roles. While I was in high school, they were there to kind of realign my focus and help me figure out my vision, or you know, where I wanted to go and things like that. And because of them, I feel like I'm able to put myself at the forefront. I'm able to serve as a positive example and a role model to a lot of our students who go to the schools that we service. And if it wasn't for them and the people that I met and the positivity and the talks and things like that that they've done for me, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. I wouldn't have met phenomenal people like Lily, the organization like Academica, and the other leadership and educational stakeholders that we do work with today. I was given the opportunity to speak with over 300 students just the other day, and it felt like a breath of fresh air. You know, in a million years, I'd never think that, you know, someone like me would be working in the field of education. And like I told everyone, education goes way far than beyond the classroom, than reading a textbook and things like that. It's understanding every single student that we service and how we can meet those needs of every single students on the micro and on the macro level. So I, thank you, Lily. Thank you to Mike for sharing your story. And, I'm glad that, I can relate on, certain levels and things like that and how we can overcome these challenges. So thank you.
Isn't he amazing, Mike? Like, isn't he the most amazing kid in the world? I just love him.
Awesome.
I think that it's interesting that you said, that you talked about your teachers, because I think I can't emphasize enough how Mike had to become a transitional character. He had to consciously make the decision, I am not going to fall in this cycle of horribleness, of what's going on in my life, of this substance abuse. I have to make a change. And he had to do it on his own, but he had pivotal people in his life. And plus he had, I think God was always with you, because wow, just and guys, I'm telling you that those are just a few of the stories. There's no way in this podcast, it would be like a 12-hour podcast for me to share everything about Mike's journey, and definitely his very difficult journey with reaching sobriety. I mean, I can't stress enough, a dose of positivity really has made a huge difference in my life. But I do feel that we can be those Miss Plumbers. We can unlock superpowers in our children, especially children that, have a disability. And for those parents that are listening and have a child that might be going through a very difficult time right now, there is hope out there. There are people that will help your child go to the school, ask for help. Don't be ashamed. Don't be embarrassed. We want to be able to help you. There's individuals just like Mike Diamond, even though I highly recommend Mike Diamond, that can help and just put you in the right path so that you can help your children. And I just think it's just beautiful what your story is, Mike, and how very impactful it is for educators and for parents. And so, as I was saying, Mike, I always end the podcast. There's so much more that we could talk about, so I'm gonna have to bring you back. So you have to promise it.
Right.
Back. But before
Yeah,
I give you the quote, can you share with all of our listeners, when is your intervention show going to be on again?
So the new season starts May 27th.
And on what channel?
It's on the network A&E. And then I think they do the repeats on Netflix after the season airs. But yeah. So
okay,
yeah,
so
it's
May 27th, A&E.
May 27th. Yeah. And I did 2 episodes this season, and then there's 8. So you'll see me on 2 of their long episodes. It's very intense.
Right?
It's a feel good at the end, but it'll take you on an emotional roller coaster, and it's really very intense.
So what I told you earlier is that I always end my podcast with a quote, and I share the quote with my presenter, my co-presenter, and then just how that might pull on their heartstrings. So I found this. I think this quote is very applicable to you in your life, and it's by Alice Walker, and she says that the most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. The most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. In your life and everything that you have struggled with, but that definitely overcome, what does that quote mean to you?
Well, it's one of the most powerful quotes, because we become hopeless and helpless because we're not getting the right information and feedback for the effort we put in. So what happens is, if you're constantly abused and beaten down and bullied, and this is why everyone, it's what you do when no one's looking. I help my neighbor who has a stroke. I help my other neighbor who has cancer. I help people at the grocery stores. The other day I was in the grocery store and a girl couldn't pay for her groceries. I pay for her groceries. And then she's like, why'd you do that? I said, well, you got to eat. And I said, what's your name? And she said, my name's Destiny. So I gave her a hug and I said, there, that's your destiny. I didn't know there was a guy behind her. I walked out to my car. The guy pulled me up and he said to me, why'd you do that? I said, someone had to do it. He gave me his card, right? And he said, look, we're looking for a motivational speaker. Do you speak? I said, check this out.
Kidding?
I swear to God, I pulled one of my books out of the back of the car. I gave him a book. I always carry my books and give them out. And he's like, that was the most incredible thing. And I go, I just give people hope. Right. That's it. I plant a seed of hope. And then I take it. I just meet people where they're at. So we lose power, but we don't realize our power. And we don't realize our potential, because no one spends time with us to unlock our potential.
Correct.
I just give people space.
Correct. And I think and just being that person that can help a child that is in crisis or is in need unlock their potential is so powerful. So thank you, Mike. I'm definitely going to bring you back because I just don't think we had enough time, but I can't stress enough. A Dose of Positivity, ladies and gentlemen. It is a wonderful, wonderful book. You can also, if you are like me that walks your dog at night, you can listen to it on Audible. But I really feel, wait, you know what? I want to take that picture real quick. So I can put it on the website. There it is, A Dose of Positivity. But listeners, please, listen, buy the book. It has already changed my life, and I feel that I'm very positive, but wow, it's definitely made a very big difference for me. So thank you so much, Mike, for being on. Ross, thank you for your lovely words. It's always so nice to hear from the youth. As I always say to everyone, always remember, if a child can't learn the way we teach, maybe we should teach the way they learn. See you next month, everyone.
The views expressed on the preceding program have been those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of Academica, its clients, staff, affiliates, or advertisers.